She stepped off the train with her heart pounding, clutching a worn leather suitcase that carried everything she owned. She had traveled across the world, chasing the promise of love, only to feel the sting of rejection before she could even take a breath. The letters had been warm, the promises sweet, but when her groom saw her skin, his face hardened with disgust. Alone in a strange land, she stood humiliated, unsure of where to turn. What she didn't know was that her darkest hour would soon lead to an unexpected twist that no one could have predicted. Her name was Amara, a young woman from Nigeria with dreams larger than the village where she was raised. She had grown up in hardship, but never let poverty define her spirit. When she read advertisements promising companionship and new beginnings through mail-order bride agencies, she saw it as her chance for a fresh start. Amara exchanged letters with a man named Thomas, a middle-aged widower living in America. His words were filled with kindness, empathy, and promises of a better life. He wrote about his farm, his need for companionship, and his admiration for her resilience. For months, their correspondence grew deeper, convincing Amara she was finally stepping toward the life she deserved. Her family, though hesitant, encouraged her to follow her heart. They saw hope in her journey and prayed she would find happiness. With what little savings they had, they helped pay for her ticket. She boarded the ship, her heart heavy with both fear and excitement, envisioning a warm welcome and a future free from the limits of her past. But the moment she arrived, reality struck harder than any storm she had faced. The man she thought would be her husband looked at her not as a partner but as a mistake. He muttered coldly about how she had deceived him, claiming he never expected her to be black. He refused to take her home, leaving her stranded at the station in humiliation. Passers-by stared, some with pity, others with contempt. Amara, abandoned and alone, wondered if she had traded her homeland for nothing but heartbreak. The small town whispered about the foreign woman left behind at the station. Some regarded her as an outcast, a spectacle rather than a human being. With nowhere to go, Amara tried to find work, but most doors slammed shut the moment people noticed her accent and her skin. Even when she offered to clean homes or tend fields, employers muttered excuses. Others bluntly told her she didn't belong. Nights were the hardest. Amara rented a cramped room above a bar with the last of her coins. The walls were thin, the nights cold, and hunger gnawed at her stomach. She wrapped herself in the blanket her mother had given her, the only reminder of home, whispering prayers for strength. Each day she walked to the train station, not because she expected Thomas to return, but because it gave her a sense of direction. On one of those days, her life took a turn she never could have imagined. A man named William, a wealthy farmer, known for his large wheat fields, noticed her sitting alone. William wasn't like the others. Where others saw a stranger, he saw resilience. He had heard the town gossip about the abandoned bride, but what struck him most was how she carried herself with quiet dignity despite the cruelty surrounding her. Curious, he approached her. At first, Amara braced herself for another insult, but instead he asked if she was hungry. She hesitated, then nodded. William invited her to share a meal at a local diner. Though whispers filled the room as they sat together, William paid no mind. He listened as Amara shared her story, her voice trembling at first, then gaining strength as she recounted the betrayal she had endured. William was moved, not just by her words, but by the strength it took to tell them. He saw beyond her skin, beyond the gossip, to the woman who had traveled across oceans in search of hope. Unlike Thomas, William understood resilience. He, too, had faced loneliness since losing his wife years earlier. As days turned into weeks, William invited Amara to visit his farm. She helped tend the animals, watered the crops, and learned the rhythm of rural life. For the first time since her arrival, Amara felt useful again. The land, vast and golden, gave her peace. The farmhands, though wary at first, came to respect her work ethic. Slowly, the isolation she once felt began to fade, but the town's whispers grew louder. Some accused William of ruining his reputation by keeping company with a colored woman. Others muttered that Amara was using him. One night, graffiti appeared on his barn, crude words meant to shame them both. The hatred burned, but William refused to back down. Amara feared her presence was destroying his life, but William assured her it wasn't shame he felt. It was pride. Their connection deepened, not out of pity but out of mutual respect and admiration. Still, society's judgment loomed like a storm waiting to break. The breaking point came during the town's annual harvest fair. William invited Amara to join him, determined not to hide their bond. When they arrived together, silence rippled through the crowd. Some stared with disapproval, others openly mocked. A group of men, emboldened by drink, sneered at Amara and hurled racial slurs loud enough for all to hear. Amara froze, shame and fear flooding her chest. The laughter cut deep, a cruel reminder of every rejection she had endured. William, however, refused to let the moment pass. He stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding, addressing the crowd. He reminded them that their community had been built by immigrants, by people once considered outsiders. He spoke of how Amara had shown more courage and resilience than most of them ever would. His words were sharp, unflinching, and carried the weight of truth. He declared that if anyone had a problem with her, they had a problem with him. The men, silenced. By his defiance, backed down. The crowd, uneasy, shifted in discomfort. Some turned away in shame. Others, inspired, clapped hesitantly. It wasn't a complete victory. Prejudice doesn't vanish overnight, but for Amara, it was the first time someone had stood for her publicly. Tears filled her eyes, not of weakness but of release. The rejection that once haunted her no longer defined her. In that moment, she realized she had found something Thomas could never have given her: respect, dignity, and a partner who saw her as equal. In the months that followed, Amara and William grew inseparable. She officially moved to the farm, where she not only worked beside him, but also brought her own knowledge of farming from her homeland. Together, they expanded the business, blending techniques and creating something stronger than either could have achieved alone. The townspeople, though slow to change, began to notice. They saw how William's farm thrived, how Amara treated others with kindness despite the cruelty she had endured. Some who once whispered against her now came to her for advice or shared meals at her table. Prejudice still lingered, but cracks began to form in the walls of ignorance. Amara often thought back to the day she arrived, humiliated, abandoned, left to feel worthless. That rejection, though painful, had been the path to something greater. What seemed like the end of her dreams was the beginning of a life built on respect, love, and resilience. Her story became more than just personal triumph. It became a quiet challenge to those around her. If a woman once left at a train station with nothing could rise to such dignity, what excuse did others have for their hate? Years later, when people spoke of Amara, they no longer referred to her as the abandoned bride. They spoke of her strength, her partnership with William, and the legacy they built together. Her life became proof that rejection does not define a person. Resilience does. And perhaps the most powerful truth of all, sometimes the greatest, heartbreaks lead us exactly where we are meant to be. So, the question remains, how many lives are still being dismissed, overlooked, or discarded today, not because of who people are, but because of the color of their skin? And what would happen if, like William, more of us chose to see beyond prejudice, to recognize the humanity that connects us all?